if a country stops producing food, that's one thing very different than an inspector coming in to seize your garden. But what happens when they stop producing food in the United States, Argentina, Australia, etc., and then they really ramp up these laws where you can't have a garden and you can only get it through an approved distributor, i.e. Costco, i.e. whatever. And then you're forced back on the system where they rip up every shred of possible self-sufficiency that you have, and they push you CBDC-wise back into that tunnel of control. And, then if you speak out against it, your CBDCs got cut off. Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Yes, and you look at today and the main dates which pop up that go along with this World Economic Forum, they've got these dates set in place, 2025, 2030. They've got this timeline for us to go green and detransition away from fossil fuels and become less dependent on what they say is bad for the world, to reduce the carbon. But those dates just seem to go straight in line with what's happening with our sun and the impacts it's having on our world physically. So do you think that's them rubbing the date in our faces, or is that them trying to set up the plebs, the working class, the people that they can see as being lesser than them, setting them up as a distraction and kind of manipulating the system in a way that they can extract that last little bit out before they go into hiding?
Well, a bit of both. And, one big thing that a lot of people are overlooking here is they're going to keep breeding stock for the serf class alive somewhere. So if you think about these 15-minute cities, are they really 15-minute cities, or are they going to be zones where breeding plebeian stock and peasantry is kept at minimal subsistence levels to continue to breed? Because the way we look at it with information flowing on the internet the last few years, 20 years, for example, there's been a split in also the way, like, you're incredibly intelligent. I know a lot of other people who are incredibly intelligent, but then it's just like this wealth extraction. You have this super incredible elite that control a vast majority of the Earth's resources, but now do that in a thinking sense. So there's a huge amount at the bottom there that only eat junk food, only consume the news. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. How high shall I jump? That's the kind of people they want. So if you're going to run into a 15-minute city perceiving safety, that's the kind of person they want. They don't want you or I out here growing our own food. We're the wrong kind of person. We ask questions. We do research. We try to delve into things to make sense of them.
It's almost an Aldous Huxley analogy of a Brave New World, where they've got the controllable people who are controlled through dopamine hits and all the things that make them feel happy and pleasant and at ease. And then you've got the wild people who live out on the fringes who are truly free but are seen as pond scum in comparison to the people that run these giant megalithic cities that are self-sufficient.
I'll be the pond scum, because you know what? Algae is some of the best fertilizer you can possibly put on your plants. A surging national debt is bullish for gold. The debt ceiling drama ended with nominal budget cuts and a shiny new credit card with no limit for the federal government. The first business day after the U.S. Treasury increased our national debt by $350 billion. It's no wonder Google searches for how to buy gold hit record levels in 2023. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Also, Patriot Gold Group, Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer 6 years in a row. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video.
Yeah, so there's this idea that Failure is just, you can't do it. Failure is a terrible thing. If you experience failure, you shouldn't have tried in the first place. But failure is fertilizer. Failure helps you learn from the mistakes you've made and helps you persevere and grow in whatever you're doing. So we have to go out there. We have to get our hands dirty. We have to try things. We have to try a crop for the first time. And if half of it fails, so be it. You know what to do differently next time. You know what to plant instead. And that's the idea which people in these 15-minute cities would never think of, because they've got everything on the ready. Everything they need in life is within a 15-minute walking time frame from their house. They don't have to worry about things. They've got those creature comforts presented for them. They've got Big Daddy government there to support them in every single way.
Oh, and here comes another line of electrical front and run for your life and we can stay in the building. They're grounded. We don't have to worry about that. Oh, and the 20-pound hailstones, well, they built the concrete a little bit extra tough with the hempcrete. So we're safe inside the shelter here as long as the storms pass. We're going to get into some superstorm kind of stuff. But I'll say one thing about making mistakes. If you're going to be doing some homesteading, first and foremost, number one thing you're going to need to learn about is fencing. Because you're going to have to start to fence things off to keep predators out and keep for example, our dogs in so they can protect. You're going to want to fence things off so the chickens have their own area there. Sheep are going to need their thing. We've got turkeys over here, like turkey section for a better term. But you're going to need to start fencing stuff off. And then for the garden, then you need to put different fencing so the rabbits can't get in there. The amount of mistakes you're going to make on fencing, on putting poles in and trying to just even get the wire up and wrap it and all these. Whoa. It's going to take you a year plus of just doing so many different projects and making the mistakes. And I encourage you to make as many mistakes as you can, because you're going to find a better way to do it. But I would encourage you even more to find somebody who's already done and made all the mistakes for you and bring them on as an expert to help you out immediately, so you learn the best of techniques immediately instead of having to go through that learning curve. There's a lot of things moving forward here, and making mistakes is going to be one of them. And, again, you hit on it earlier with the root rot and things with vegetation and different types of plants. It's going to be an ever-moving curve to deal with all these changes in our system, the Earth's terrestrial system. The electromagnetic field's changing. The UVB is going to increase, or UV radiation striking the ground surface is going to increase. Temperatures, rainfall, there's so many things that the seasons will be shorter or longer depending on where you are on the planet at the moment. And it sounds exactly like I'm describing global warming the original way that they described global warming. Well, why is that? Well, they knew these electromagnetic effects would have the same effect. They set up global warming in your mind knowing that that's exactly what would occur in this electromagnetic changes from the sun on our planet. So they placed that. So once you see it, you're not scared. You're like, oh, that's global warming. But they already put it in place. So you got to realize this whole global warming thing was to accustomize you to these natural earth changes that we're seeing. And we're going to have to deal with them as we move through, but they're going to get way more amplified than they have told you in the global warming scenarios. The hail events is one big thing that's going to get. The updrafts are going to be much stronger with the changes in the jet streams, and the cloud cells are colliding in the sky. So when you get an atmospheric river coming out of the sky, atmospheric compression event is the way John Casey had described it to me. And the more that there's collisions in the sky, the stronger the wind on the updrafts will become. And you need the updraft to get that hail up there and then drop it and then pull it back up and drop it and create those layers on the ice on the outside, starting from that dust particle. But we're going to see some massive hail. I mean, you talk about what would happen if your average size hail was 2 kilos every storm? And on the outset, you would get some that's like 10 kilo hail coming down. And that's 22 pounds for those of you in the States. This is what was referenced in the 1600s of 20-pound hailstones. And the Bible talks about this too, these massive hailstones coming down. And in the 1300s also, between actual real sightings of people in logs and journals talking about massive hail pounding villages into splinters made of wood buildings, and then also religious references to the same. You got to think there's some truth in that. And now we get some scientific validation that the hail size is going to increase as we move forward. That's scary.
It is very scary. And they think that they're priming us for something that they don't actively want to tell us about, but they're getting us used to the idea of it. Like you said, they put out films like The Day After Tomorrow where they show these basketball-sized hailstones hitting the ground. Well, we've all seen the damage that golf ball-sized hail can do to cars and houses. Imagine what happens when it's a bowling ball or a watermelon or bigger. That's just going to be in itself detrimental to society and our infrastructure. But the thing that really concerns me is there's a lot going on in the media at the moment, little 5-minute snippet stories about near misses with Earth, with 3 school bus size asteroids or meteors or 12 giraffe-sized stones in the space flying towards Earth. They always give it these really stupid, ridiculous measurements to make the story a joke and something that shouldn't be taken seriously. But we're seeing an uptick in these celestial bodies coming very close to our planet. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you missed the story of 3 elephants standing on each other's backs on top of a beach ball rolling past the Earth. Yeah, so they're like the weakening magnetic field across our solar system. It's just allowing more things to come past the sun that would normally get pulled into the sun as a sun grazer comet or some sort of, debris that would get sucked into the sun or burnt up. There's a lot more that's going to be passing through. And there's another thing they're priming you for that's coming in April of 2025. So I talk about these gas giants lining up in a square configuration as perceived from our planet in October of 2024. In the outer solar system, we have the sun, and then the Earth's going to pass through that magnetic anomaly, second magnetic field. I mean, really not so many terms for it because I don't think they understood it to the aspect that we do with magnetism back in, say, the Roman era. Once we pass through that, the Earth's going to swing out in front of the sun in 2025 of April, and it will be the only thing there. It'll be the Earth in front of the sun behind us, all the planets behind us, all the gas giants behind us in a square. And that's the thing. It's going to tug everything into the planet, into the front of the planet here. So anything that's space debris is going to pelt our Earth first. So and the way I'm seeing these stories is a buildup to get you more conditioned to more space debris, ground strikes, more bolides rolling through the atmosphere, larger ones. And we've seen an uptick. Like, it's hard to turn on the news now if you follow alternative extreme weather news that you can't find just giant bolides lighting up the skies with shock wave, hitting at once it hits that termination point in the atmosphere. If it gets to that point of breakup before it strikes the ground, these are more common than not now, these bigger events. And that's going to be something to behold, and I'm super excited to be part of it, to be able to witness it. When we come around, April of 2025 is going to be something to behold. And, these 20, 30, and the 15-minute cities, I think, is going to be for those who are terrified enough that they're going to run for safety and they're going to beg for it. And the things that you're going to have to do to get into these cities and be accessible to the food, the water, you're going to be chipped. At the same time, when they were setting up global warming excuses, they could have told us, hey, all this is really inbound. Why don't you all start growing your food and getting your community set? But then they would lose their breeding stock, and there also wouldn't be any control mechanism, and they wouldn't be able to siphon the wealth, because most people would have gone off system by now. Truly, they would have. Because if it would have been on every front page newspaper, hey, get your communities ready, hey, get your food, just as much as they're indoctrinating us about XYZ, choose your frivolousness of the month here. There's a lot of control lost when people get autonomous. But you're going to need to be autonomous to really get through this. You can't go into those cities. Please don't go in there. If you do, you're stuck. You're not coming out. There'll be containment grids with wire fencing facing inward. Once you get in there, you're not coming out.
Not at all.
That's a scary thing.
And I think this is why they've got in their long-term plans by 2025, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of plans around grounding a lot of international flights and domestic flights. They're trying to stop the amount of air travel that's happening in the world because of the carbon emissions, right? Well, that does 2 things. It prevents people from getting to places where they can be safe for themselves. They can avoid those 15-minute cities. But it also gets planes out of the sky if these bolides and these bodies in space are actually penetrating our atmosphere. It's not going to be the safest place to have aircraft, is it?
No, and you have to think about electromagnetic field changes. You talk about the Bermuda Triangle. Well, that is an electromagnetic field anomaly within our planet's crust. Now, imagine if that turns on to level 10. And what happens? There's one off of Asia too. It's the Asian Triangle between Japan and Taiwan.
The Devil's Triangle, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. You know more about that one than I do because you're closer there. But think about all these electromagnetic airplanes going along, and then it hits a zone. It literally just drops straight out of the sky like a stone. Like you can only do that once or twice before people start asking questions. And if it's different types of aircraft too, like if it's a 737, 767, whatever, and they're all starting to drop out, that's a huge problem versus it's this model. It's the 770 or whatever. It's this one. We got to ground the fleet of those until we figure it out. Well, that's a great excuse until it starts happening to little tiny Cessnas, anything from the larger aircraft. I mean, what are you seeing on the 2025 landscape? Like where you are down in Australia, what are they programming your mind for from like, let's say now to 2025, which is just another year and a half. And then from 2025 to 2030, it seems like there's two segments that they're each individually plugged in for. So I'm curious down in Australia, like what are they preparing you for down there mentally, or how are they getting you to, I know the messaging's similar around the world, but it's going to be slightly different for each area.
Well, I think personally they're trying to drive people into the big cities at the moment. They're dismantling all the means of regional professions and economies. We're supposed to have a 2026 end to old growth forest logging, which is sustainable because they regrow it in our state. Well, they've just brought that forward by a year. So all logging in my state will disappear next year. So you're going to have all these regional families who are forced out of their regional homes, often they're hobby farmers, and they're going to be forced into the big cities. On top of that, we have a lot of the energy infrastructure is being shut down. We're losing a lot of our coal mines. They're shutting them down and they're not replacing them with anything other than renewables, which we know just doesn't stack up on a bigger scale for what the needs are of the populace. So they're definitely driving the majority of the Australian population into our capital cities, I think preparing us to be in a place that we can't get out of, at the same time as setting in place things like digital driver's licenses, which you have to have on a digital device like a phone or an iPhone or a Android. So they're setting up that CBDCs kind of a system where we're constantly trackable. They know where we are and they know where we're living at all times.
Yeah, and I'll throw a new one out here since you're in Australia and I'm in the United States here. This came out on June 3rd, this article. Somebody sent it to me. It's like, David, you got to look at this. Thank you for anybody out there that's, giving me hat tips and directions to articles, because I'm only one person, I can't see everything. So anybody who sent me links, thank you so much. It really helped me, delve down into some things, because you got all these sets of eyes out there on the same problem. Where does it take us? So here's the article here. 13 nations agree to abolish farming. And I said, what? So what they're going to do is stop farming pretty much. There's going to be limits on nitrogen. If you buy nitrogen fertilizer, you're going to have to register to buy it. Like I have a registered farm here and I'm on a green belt because I have enough acres to qualify for that program. But for them, the way it reads for me is they're going to make me register to be able to go buy fertilizer. And once I reach my allotment for the year, then they'll say, no, you can't buy anymore. And again, that rolls right back into the CBDCs. Now, here's the nations that are signing on to this pledge to transform their farm policies. And this is the thing. It's so vague. It's the Global Methane Pledge, and it's to focus on the deployment of science-based practices, innovation, technologies in line with sustainable food production, which means insects, in my opinion. But that's all it is this whole binding agreement that they put out that now 17 nations. So I'll read them to you here. The United States, 13 nations, I misspoke, excuse me. United States, Argentina, Australia, Brazil. And they're looking to go, whoa. Those are all the major grain producers right there. If you were going to scrape together the world's grain production, and Germany's in there too. They're a huge grain producer. United States, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, and Germany. That is a lion's share of the global grain production. And then we have a smaller one here from Africa, Burkina Faso, Chile, Czech Republic, Ecuador, Panama, Peru, and Spain. Now, they've all agreed to meet again in 2024, or at least push their agendas, because apparently there's too much methane, too much CO2, and too much nitrogen pollution in the waterways, that we need to stop agriculture in these nations and switch it or supplant it with what they call sustainable food production. Drew, you and I know for sure what that is. That is not anything yummy that has a fat and marbled content on it.
Lovely.
I really
crickets.
am shocked that such an article would come out. I really am.
Well, it gets worse, David. If, like you said and alluded to earlier, it would be fantastic if they gave us the heads up and we all started making victory gardens now and we all started helping each other and supporting each other. But they don't want that for us. So much to the fact that in Victoria, my state of Australia, a Biosecurity Act amendment occurred where government officials can come onto your property, seize livestock, crops, including backyard gardens. Why does a government need to step foot onto my property to check out what my carrots are doing or my potatoes? It's just a means of controlling what little self-sufficiency we have left, because like you said, they don't want us to be that way. They want us to move into these big cities and be the serfs of their techno-feudalist future.
You know, how many instances have you heard of that happening since that law was passed? Are there articles out like they came into my backyard and ripped up my entire pumpkin patch and took all my beets out or something? I mean, I could see with the livestock because they've been raiding farms here. And oh, by the way, you know, I live about a mile and a half from the Amish farm where we are at. Now, last year, they were hassled by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. An inspector came in and said, you can't sell the eggs, because they had them out, you know, in the egg section right there. No, and they had to put them under the counter, right? So then you had to ask for them, but they were under the counter and they were still visible. Like if you checked out at either, you know, to pay for your thing, you could see the eggs under the counter. Well, the USDA was just in there last week and hassled them again. Oh, you can see the eggs. So they were required to put like a sheet or a piece of fabric over so you couldn't even see the eggs to ask them for them. You literally had to ask. And any sign in the whole entire place that said ask for eggs, they had to take down. So any reference of eggs in the place is gone. And the actual visual seeing it somewhere in there, and you could ask, hey, are those eggs? Can I buy them? They had to put that under fabric so nobody can see the eggs. And you're not allowed to put a poster up or a sign up that says we have eggs for sale. So I know on the meat and the egg side, they're really messing with the Amish here. And I'm sorry, I disturbed your thought. Back to that. Have you seen any instances of them going into home gardens or, you know, on farms to confiscate veg or meat or animal?
They're starting at very small scale. They're setting up the system that allows them to, air quotes, legally do it, where we've recently in Australia for the first time had the bee mite get into our colonies. So they're starting off now by burning out and destroying people's bee colonies if they're in an affected area. They can have complete evidence that their bees aren't infected. Vets can notify them that, yes, there's no mites within these colonies, but they're killing off large swaths of people's personal beehives while leaving the big corporate ones alone. And we're starting to see this come into effect with chickens. So we've got big concerns about avian flu coming down from Southeast Asia to the point where they're targeting backyard chicken coops, but leaving the battery farms. They're allowed to go as business as usual.
I'm really hoping articles like this wake people up that, you know, at what point, and I'm really asking a serious question, like at what point do people finally wake up and go, oh, they want to stop food production in all these major food producing nations? At what point do they wake up and go, whoa, this is no longer anything about climate protection. They're stopping the food supply on purpose. And, you know, that's one question to ask. But then everybody out there listening, I mean, you might be very well pushed to the point of they're coming on your farm. They're coming to your house to steal your food supply. And when we come in a little bit further in the future, that's going to be incredibly valuable. Like you might not make it if they take your food supply. And there's going to be some choices that you're going to need to make now in your mind. Like, what are you going to do and how far are you going to go to defend that? You know, you're going to have to make that choice before they're there. It's not like, oh, they show up and they're like, well, I'm thinking about, should I do or should I? You already have to have this solidly in your mind. So it's like a 2-second response time for when you see people there and what are you going to do? Now, the conditions for defense of that are quite different across the world. You know, America has a completely different method to do that than other places. So, you know, let's say you had 4 inspectors in your backyard. How would you stop them from taking? How far are your neighbors willing to go to? Because you're going to be next. You let them take food out of one place and people start starving in the neighborhoods or in your city, you're next. And what happens if, well, this whole city needs to be cleansed of backyard gardens? At what point do people in the entire city just stand up as like a unified force and go, no. Nope, you don't come in here.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It comes down to community. Like if we have these government officials coming in and seizing people's crops one off, and you're trying to fight off the official that's coming in to take your potatoes. Sure, he comes back with the police and you get arrested. That's a one-off. But if you have your entire neighborhood standing around your house protecting your property, we need to go back to what happened during the end of the collapse in the 1920s, where the banks were trying to sell people's houses and they were trying to sell it for pennies on the dollar. And what we had was the communities rallying around these people and protecting their homes and stopping people from coming in to buy their houses from underneath them. If we have farmers that are steadfast and strong in their communities, maybe they can send a message to the rest of the world. These people that have the blinkers on, living in their cities, watching TV, maybe they'll go, oh, geez, those farmers are, they're really onto it. They're really worried about their crops. Maybe we should be worried now. But unfortunately, I think COVID taught us a very valuable lesson that people don't realize there's a problem until the shelves are empty.
And even then, they'll just think that the food's going to arrive sometime in the future. So when you mentioned the Great Depression, I know it was, mainly centered in the U.S. with the largest amount of collateral damage here, but I know it spilled out into other nations. So when you were talking about that, were you talking about Australia? They were doing the same thing of taking the farms when they had the penny auctions?
It was more so in the United States, like you said, but that's what I'm familiar with when the penny auctions were occurring. Australia, we're quite lucky with our geographical isolation from the rest of the world. And even to this day, we're quite an underdeveloped nation. So people kind of retained what they had. It was still very much a frontier country at that time.
Yeah, because there was a lot of interconnect between Europe at that time during the Great Depression. They won't do penny auctions today. Like, BlackRock will be in there on a computer screen press, and I own that now. So it'll just be, at that point, it'll be something similar when the new tenant or the new owner comes in and tries to, take your goods out of the house or, move in, then it'll take the community to stop the new tenant from trying to come in. There's going to be some difficult choices to be made here, moving forward, because they literally are going to take your food away. And then it's really very different levels of, if a country stops producing food, that's one thing very different than an inspector coming in to seize your garden. But what happens when they stop producing food in the United States, Argentina, Australia, etc., and then they really ramp up these laws where you can't have a garden and you can only get it through an approved distributor, i.e. Costco, i.e. whatever. And then you're forced back on the system where they rip up every shred of possible self-sufficiency that you have, and they push you CBDC-wise back into that tunnel of control. And, then if you speak out against it, your CBDCs got cut off because you didn't just let them come in and completely take everything and you just sit in your house and have a cup of tea and watch them with no disturbance, not even a single word, then you'll be allowed to keep your CBDC. But the minute you step out on your front porch, you're like, whoa, what are you guys doing? Oh, that's -5. No, stop that. Hey, no, get out of the way. Oh, that's -10. Oh, you just try to stop them from taking your food. That's a complete shut off for a month. I could see the blending of these two worlds, and it never really hit me until I saw this article here on stopping the food production and registering your fertilizer is the first two things here. Like the registry of fertilizer in America for a farmer to get, and once they go past their allotted amount, which is yet undecided, it's just follow the science. Well, how much is too much? Obviously, they're going to say like 1 grain of nitrogen fertilizer is too much. Stop the golf courses first. They're the biggest polluters. And if you go to any golf course, generally where there's runoff into the ocean or into some lakes, there's huge algae blooms. I guarantee they're going to go after agriculture before they go after golf courses. And again, that comes back to the parasite class, because they need their golf courses for relaxation, but you to be able to grow food is going to be off limits.
Absolutely. They want their downtime. They want all their luxuries, but with everyone else, the peasant class that we are, we just have to keep going about our business as they see fit. Now, to close this out, David, if you had a Paul Revere moment, now I know you've been giving fantastic information to your listeners for a long time now, but if you could have a Paul Revere moment riding through the countryside saying the English are coming, what would you say instead? What's the one bit of information you would do to warn people? What would you give them?
The complex systems are going to begin to break down further, faster now. They're in an amplification phase. Because you also said 2025. I have a lot of things 2025, and everywhere you look on the news, it's 2025. So between now and then, I mean, we're looking at what, 18 months? So there's going to have to be an amplification of every breakdown thing, whatever the form that takes. And, I am talking about complex systems here. I know you love to talk about Tartaria, and I really believe that as we come into this 2024 magnetic field anomaly, there's going to be areas on the planet that experience a global liquefaction event. And we are going to watch mud and sand and water, et cetera, ooze out of the earth like toothpaste and start burying cities. And the top 10 or 20 feet of buildings will be buried across the cities. And there could be places that just simply sink like they did. And you've seen some of these more famous Japanese earthquakes where buildings actually just sink down in when it's shaking, the sand, et cetera. Like, there's a lot of things to think about. There will be write-offs on part of the planet, and that's just baked into the cake. So where does that leave you then? It leaves you with your self-sufficiency and your community. And if the authorities come in to confiscate or destroy your access to life, as in they're coming in and trying to dynamite your well. So they say, well, you can't use that anymore because the water table or this or that or the other. You want to have springs anyway. Wells are pretty contaminated. You want spring water. But if they were to come in and start blasting and saying, well, you can't use this water source anymore, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have to choose life or death then, because when they do that, you die. So you have to put it in that context. If they're coming in to rip out your gardens, that's your food for your family. If that gets done, you die. You understand that. There's no in between anymore. It's very black and very white. If they destroy your resources, you are going to die. And we look at it in the Holodomor, and you could just do chat, go to the Bolshevik Revolution, jump over to Ukraine, by the way, which is super interesting. We're back in the breadbasket of Ukraine again, of the central area there. Now, and look and see how the communists firewalled off all of the farmers, demonized the farmers, stopped food production, and caused a famine. And when you look at that and you go, damn, that's the blueprint they're using right now. I never would have thought the Bolshevik Revolution and the whole, Holodomor over in Ukraine was coming back again. But with this article that was released yesterday, they are absolutely trying to start the Holodomor 2.0, but on a global basis versus a single nation. Because firewalling off access to seed, food, medicines, whatever it was in the 1930s that they did for the farmers is no different than taking down the supply chains globally right now. And to stop agriculture and confiscate farm machinery is no different than what they did in the 1930s in Ukraine. So if they're coming for your farm machinery and there's a group of guys or girls or whatever of the authorities that are coming to take your farm machinery, they're going to starve you to death. I encourage you to look at the Holodomor in the 1930s and see what that whole chapter was about. Once you read it and you see the complexities in this article that just came out where they want to stop farming, what they've done with the Dutch farmers, how they're demonizing now fertilizers as being bad for everybody when they were great up until this point. And suddenly, what is it with this switch where every complex system needs to shut down? All travel needs to stop. All agriculture needs to stop on the planet. Everything that you need for your daily life needs to stop. And also, they're going to cut your power at some point. And if they do keep it on, and then it's suddenly 16 times more expensive. And then what? You can see the same gameplay. I know it's a little dark to think about, but you need to understand the problem to really make a solution. At the very base layer of it is grow your own food, get your community set. Okay, that's if things continue naturally in their own course, you're going to need to do that. A history book is your crystal ball. This is so ridiculous what's happening right now. So, Drew, I appreciate you having me on. I hate to be dark in that last moment. People really are going to have to assess the situation. You cannot put your head in the sand any longer. This is a war against humanity. This is a non-human entity against Homo sapiens sapien.
Thank you. Time is of the essence, and we don't have time to sugarcoat it or to put it in the niceties of how we wish things could be. It's like you're the third monkey on the ramp to get up Noah's Ark, and brother, it started raining, so you better start fighting for your life and what you've got ahead of it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming on, David. It's fantastic having you. And from someone who started off as a listener, I'm just so proud that I've had the opportunity to actually speak to you in person. Thank you for being on.
Hey, my pleasure. We're all in it together.